Hey there, welcome to the Compare to Who show. I'm Heather Creekmore, and today my guest is Dr. Tamara Rosier, and she is here to talk about something that, honestly, a year ago, I would have been like, we will never do a show on that. That doesn't have any connection to body image issues at all. But wow, you all, I've been learning stuff, and Tamara's here to help us see a connection, wait for it, between potentially ADHD and our body image issues. What? Now, I'm of the generation where ADHD is still a little bit, unless you have a kid that's diagnosed with it, it's still a little uncommon to me. And so I am so excited that you're here today, Tamara. And I don't even know where to start, but I think we should probably start by, why don't you just tell us what ADHD is, for those that are just like,
Yes.
I've heard of it, it's in the news, but what does that mean?
Yeah. I'm so glad to start there because here's the thing. ADHD has become a punchline with people like, look, squirrel. And they're referring to that movie, Disney movie Up, or Pixar, maybe it's Pixar, whatever. And ADHD is not that funny when you have it. So I don't want to start out as Debbie Downer, but ADHD folks, and I have ADHD, it's a neurological difference. And here's what this means. And I promise I won't nerd out too much for your people, but it means we use our brains a little bit differently. And so if your listeners tap on their forehead, that's where their prefrontal cortex is. And that's a handy modern amenity for remembering what you went to the grocery store for, where you parked your car, not to leave your phone on the checkout aisle. It's all those little details. It's the part of the brain that tells you what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. And you probably already put it together. Those of us with ADHD, we can't really rely on our prefrontal cortex. But that's okay. Our brains are wonderful. Neuroplasticity says, that's okay, we'll redo it. And so what we do is we tend to rely on a different part of our brain called the limbic center. And the limbic center is a very, very kind of animalistic part, because all animals have a limbic center.
Okay.
And it's fight, flight, freeze. And we've added appease. And that's when you're trying to people please. Okay. So that's part of your amygdala. And so in the limbic center, there's the amygdala, and it's constantly sensing, are we in danger or not? And remember, God made that part of the brain to keep us safe. Here's a little bit of the snafu, though. We live in a modern world. And when you have a brain that relies on your limbic system going, am I safe or not? We become confused. So we start to think that studying for a test tomorrow, is the end of the world. And we act like a bear is chasing us instead of we're going to walk in. I make a joke with my clients because everything ends. They're like, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? And it all ends with them living underneath a bridge, right? And then I will get kicked out of my house, and I won't have anywhere to go, and I'll live under the bridge for the rest of my life. Because that's how their brain will do it. So we have to understand what ADHD is, and we have to carefully maneuver the modern world with it.
Well, and I feel like in your book, you use the term neurodivergent more. And anything else that needs to be explained there, other than what you just said? Is there any other component to that?
Well, so I could go through the symptoms of ADHD, but the problem is when we do a symptom approach, instead of a neurological difference, people are focusing on fixing our symptoms. And I'm uncomfortable with that. Now, I will say ADHD is not a gift. So anyone out there going, woohoo, ADHD is my gift, I'm like, okay, sit down with me and let me talk to you about the research. Because it's not a gift in the modern world. It actually puts us at a disadvantage because the modern world is asking us to use a lot of our prefrontal cortex for a lot of dumb details. Right? I say dumb details, that's kind of an ADHD joke because they're dumb if I can't remember them.
Right? So I know you don't want to go through the symptoms, but let me just kind of, I want to share.
Oh, I will. I won't be obstinate.
well, but I'd love to, So I feel like my audience kind of has gotten to know me a little bit, and I want to
Yeah.
kind of give some context to why we're having
Yeah.
this conversation. So I guess it was last spring, you were on one of my friend's podcasts. My friend Erin Carey has a podcast called Sparking Wholeness. And Erin and I have been a longtime friends, and she's been a guest on the show a number of times, and she's written for my blog. And the thing that we've always had in common is body image issues. I mean, we've had more than that in common, but that was one of the main things that connected us. And so Erin sent me this little text and was like, "Hey, I think I have or I think I have ADHD." And I was like, "Why would you think that? Like, I don't really know too much about ADHD, but like, what's the connection?" And so she asked me to listen to the interview she did with you. And I did. And you said something in the interview about how you could spot someone with ADHD because at a restaurant, they are twirling the straw paper or the napkin. I have never left a straw wrapper or napkin unscathed.
I love that.
And I didn't even notice. But now all I do every time I go to a restaurant is I look around and I watch everyone else to see, oh, why is no one else twirling their straw paper? Like, why doesn't anyone else twist their napkin? And, everyone else, lays their napkin back on, on the table, or like lays it on the tray before throwing it away. And it's all nice and neat. And mine is twisted, shaggy. And so that got my attention. And then I went on this journey researching ADHD. And one of the first things I found was connected to, and I'm not going to give it the right medical words, so I'm hoping you can come back in and fill this out, but connected to, actually the word was rejection dysphoria.
Yeah, rejection sensitivity.
Yes.
Dysphoria.
And I was like, whoa, where you, I don't know, for me, it would be like, I will read into your slight glare that you don't like me, you think I'm ugly, you think I need to go away. Oh, and here you had something in your eye, right?
Right. Yes.
And
or I was like, did I leave the curling iron on today? Like, you were thinking that, but you're watching my face going, this is about me.
Right.
Your amygdala is picking up the danger, right? Because social rejection is dangerous.
Yeah.
Come on, you were a middle school girl. You know how dangerous that is. Right?
Not just middle school.
Right. Well, that's when well, actually it's happening younger and younger now. Mm-hmm. So women learn very quickly. And this is, ADHD shows up a little bit differently in women. And I do want to add this, and it's why I sort of hedge the system talk, because I work with a lot of high functioning women. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're doing stuff. They're rarely accountants, but I do have a few. But because that's a really hard job when you have ADHD.
I can't balance my checkbooks.
Well, it's not a math thing. It's more just the redundancy of doing their work makes them, want to jump out of their moving car. So, but ADHD, I see high functioning women. So what we do is we hide it elsewhere. And we hide body image because it's a part of our brain, because our brains are wired for, and you nailed it, this rejection sensitivity. We're looking at people going, what did that mean? Or it just takes one person going, wow, your thighs are big. Right. And, we all know our share of snotty little girls who grew up to be snotty women. Right.
Yeah.
But then because of the way our brain's wired, we're like, oh no, I'm flawed.
Yeah.
And a lot of my female clients, now my male clients will too, but that's kind of a different thing right now, will have body dysmorphia. So here's what the ADHD brain does though. It kind of, instead of kind of sending that message out like to the prefrontal cortex going, hey, rest of the brain, what do you think about this? And that prefrontal cortex, remember, right behind our forehead, we go, you know what? She's kind of a naughty girl in other ways. So let's not take her advice. Oh no, the message doesn't reach there. We're circling it around the limbic center going, how do I feel about this? Well, and then we start to kind of create a truth out of it.
Yeah.
And our brains are wired for that.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be really depressing today about ADHD, but we've got to understand how our brains work. And kind of put caution tape around certain areas.
Yeah.
By the way, I just want to add here, women with ADHD are low-hanging fruit for narcissists.
Whoa, that could be a whole nother episode.
I know. Sorry, I didn't like. You're like, oh, that's a completely different topic.
Wow.
But,
yeah,
But it takes a narcissist to go, wow, you have big ears. All of a sudden, do you see how we can feed into that very easily? And so the reason I'm saying all this is ADHD is, we do look at symptoms. We try to reduce symptoms, but a lot of times we want to understand how your brain is functioning and what are the ruts we can fall into very easily.
Yeah.
And we want to really be careful about that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's mind blowing. Brain science aside, I think it's mind blowing in the most generic sense of the way.
So not literal mind blowing, but figuratively. Got it.
That there could be any kind of neurodivergence involved with body image issues. And I'll just tell you, as a coach, like, you kept using the word safe. And I was like, that's the word we use in coaching all the time, because that's where we're stuck, is I am not safe to be in a different size body or to look a different way or to age. Like, that is not safe for me. And, and we're doing things in my coaching program, backed by scripture, and we're reading and learning the truth. And yet there is this disconnect. Like, yes, I can say that God will keep me safe, even if I gain weight or, age poorly. But wow, that does not feel true for my body. That is really hard to walk in and act on. And to think that has something that could have something to do with something.
Let me add to this now.
Yeah.
The limbic center doesn't have words.
Okay.
Remember, this is just the part of your body that's made to put adrenaline and a cortisol in your bloodstream so you can run super fast from that bear.
Yeah.
Right? Well, we can't, it's difficult to talk to it. And so when you're saying you're safe, every part of the brain's like, she's really reputable. We can trust her. The limbic center is like, I can't hear a thing you're saying right now.
Right.
And so it's like keep cycling within there. And so we have these deeply flawed beliefs, but it's all around safety.
Yeah. So
a lot of times with my clients, when they're stuck in that safety, I really look to our body. And remember, this is the way we're created. So this isn't like new age voodoo stuff. This is just how our body is. And this is actual research. We know that if we can calm down the body, then the rest of the brain can speak. Until we calm down the body and get it out of fight or flight, we can't do it.
Yeah. And
so whatever modality your listeners use, that's fine. Prayer and meditation is seriously a thing that Christians can do.
Yeah.
That takes them out of fight or flight.
Yeah.
But I don't think in our culture we've lost what prayer meditation can actually do for our nervous system. We've made it busy work. I'm sorry, I'm going to go on quick.
No,
sorry. You can cut all this if you want.
No, go for it.
Our kind of middle class Christianity has made busy work out of quiet time. And by the way, ADHD people really can never pull off a quiet time appropriately because they're like, oh, this is so boring. I'm behind in my study already. I'm positive I'm going to fail. Right? So this isn't helpful. Yeah. But if we look back to what ancient Christians did to calm down their nervous system, they did things like walk and pray. They held things like beads and prayed. They did things. Guess what? That's very ADHD friendly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you're really interested in taking your body out of the fight or flight, go back to the more ancient traditions because those were our people.
Yeah.
So
I
sorry.
love that. No, I love that. That's so good. And it's so funny is I had, and I don't know where it went. I had a necklace and it wasn't beaded, but it was one of my students gave it to me. It had a blue apple on it. So it was I was never going to wear this necklace. Very sweet, super cute, like so sweet. I have those. But I kept it here. And that's what I played. Like I could make it through my day. Even talking to you right now, I'm like twiddling my thumbs. Like, what do I do? I need my necklace. So I love how concentrating energy into those kind of things, is a help.
Yeah.
But you said something that made me think about what those of us with body image issues do. Instead of calming ourselves down or calming our bodies down, we are the hardcore cardio 7 days a week, don't feed ourselves enough.
Right.
That's a stereotype, but I
Right.
coach lots of women, and this is kind of the story. We're
Right.
doing CrossFit or, always moving, which we know now that a lot of that hardcore, cardio intensive workout stuff actually puts you into fight or flight, right?
Exactly. So what that's called is hypervigilance.
Okay.
So now I personally don't like to work out. I run if someone's chasing me, right, with a knife. They have to have a knife, right? So I'm not a runner. So, but I do other exercise. Okay. And I do exercise quite a bit. But what happens during exercise when we overdo it, when we're running like our life is depending on it, it puts us in a hypervigilant state. And I've seen women at the gym and they're working out in that hypervigilant state. And you can tell their movements are quicker, their eye movements shift, and they almost have jerky motions. I'm thinking of a woman I saw on the rowing machine not too long ago. It's kind of jerky machine. You see how, because it's affecting her whole being. So here's what those women are afraid of. They're afraid of the opposite extreme, hypovigilance. And that's when the brain the limbic center is like, hey, I'm out. You're on your own. And you just kind of sit on the couch on Facebook, Instagram, whatever your favorite, whatever, and you just don't move.
Yeah. So
the good news is there's this middle spot, and I'll get right back to how this is related to ADHD. There's this middle spot called window of tolerance.
Okay.
And then that's where we can take in the world. We don't have to react to it. We don't have to overdo or underdo. But the research on this is we have to train our nervous system. We can't just say, trust in God, and like, cool, I'm going to go do this.
Yeah.
Right? And so the idea here is to train your body to calm down. You can do it through breath work. There's an app that there's an app on your Apple Watch. Just breathe with it, right? That takes you out of fight or flight. There's emotional freedom tapping, which is incredible for taking you out of fight or flight. So there's all these techniques. You choose your modality, but the whole goal is to increase your window of tolerance.
Yeah.
So back to ADHD, guess what? We have barely any window of tolerance. We only know the hypo or the hyper.
Yeah.
Hypo is low, hyper is high. So we only know those two on and off switches. That's an ADHD person for you. Right? I used to say, yep, I have two speeds, on and off.
Right.
That's hypo and hyper. And so I don't have this window of tolerance. And I mean, I've slowly built it, but wow, can I get out of that window of tolerance easily?
Yeah.
Those of us with ADHD easily can get into hyper or hypo because of how our brains are wired.
Yeah.
Now, I want to be clear to everyone. I don't think this is a mistake. So this isn't like, oh, wow. It's like we were hiding behind the door and God's like, well, I kind of screwed up some of these people, but you know what? Good luck, folks. This isn't a mistake. We are incredibly divergent thinkers. And when we use our divergent thinking well, man, we can solve great problems.
Yeah.
But every ADHD person's first problem is getting stuck in their limbic system, getting stuck in hypo or hyper.
Yeah, that's so good. And I'm glad you clarified that this isn't, whoops, God messed up when he made your brain. So sorry. I mean, I have said since I've been researching, I'm like, Yeah, I think this might be my superpower though, which I know you said not to say at the beginning, but I feel like I was like, oh, who said that? but I have wondered if I was maybe manic or bipolar
Mhm.
because when I write books, I can
Mhm.
just go all in and I just
Yep.
write. and
Yes.
and I mean, if I didn't have anything else in my life, I could get it done a whole lot faster than,
Mhm.
all these other people interrupting me with things
Mhm.
that they need, like dinner is a distraction. but
Mhm.
no, I can just zero in and get it done.
Mhm.
But like I was working on something this week and it's something that's going to require a number of mundane tasks. And I told my
There you
husband, I'm
go.
like, I know what I should do. I should write down every single one of these mundane tasks and I should work through them one by one and check them off to get it done. But I
Mhm.
cannot do that. I have no capacity to do
Okay, Heather,
that. Mhm.
okay, you just set me up perfectly
Yeah.
here. By the way, it's okay to say it's a superpower, but as long as you understand you've got kryptonite. So you're carrying your own kryptonite. And so it's a
I
war,
agree with that.
right? And I'm not really trying not to put anyone down, but I want people to take ADHD seriously.
Yeah.
Um, but you set me up perfectly for this. It's the mundane task that drive the ADHD person nuts.
Mm-hmm.
Unloading the dishwasher,
Mm-hmm.
laundry. What are we going to have for dinner?
Mm-hmm.
Checking the email, like
Mm-hmm.
all these dumb little things. And so here's what you said. Now you've really worked on this, so um you're kind of past this. But here's what my clients would say. Well, I know what I should do. I should just put it on a list, check it off.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so mundane because
Mm-hmm.
our limbic center is like, this has nothing to do with survival, guys.
Yeah.
So we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So then what our brain does is try to shame us into doing it,
Mm-hmm.
especially females.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I were really a good podcaster,
Mm-hmm.
I would do this. If
Mm-hmm.
I were really a good mother, if I
Mm-hmm.
were a good wife. And so the shame starts circulating. Do you see
Yeah.
how this is related to body issues?
Yeah.
Because then that shame starts to seep out other places.
Right.
And so it's just that our brains aren't wired to do mundane things. Now, I want to say to your listener, just because it's not wired doesn't mean you shouldn't do the laundry.
Right. Or
Like if
brush
you
your
have dirty
teeth.
clothes.
Right.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, brushing your teeth. Every ADHD person hates brushing their teeth.
Flossing is where I draw. I can brush my
Yeah,
teeth, but flossing every time they're like, why don't you floss? I'm like, yeah.
yeah.
It's
Let
a
me tell
struggle.
you, because I think. By the way, quick tip for my ADHD listeners there: if you hate flossing and your dentist is like, seriously, floss, buy those little picks.
Those flossers.
Yeah, those little flossers. Put them in your car, and so when you're in traffic, it gives you something to do.
That's right.
I mean, it's probably gross for other people, but who cares? I don't care if other people are
It's safer
watching
than
you.
checking your phone.
It
Right.
way safer, right? And so that's what I recommend. And
Love it.
believe it or not, my clients will do that. Do you notice I put two boring things together?
Mm,
And now my clients are like, well, this is intriguing.
yeah.
And then all of a sudden your brain starts to go, okay, this is a little bit more interesting
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And plus my clients feel like they're kind of hacking the system, sticking it to the
Yeah.
man. They're just really like excited.
Well, I'm thinking of two boring things together. Like, so I had to give up kind of cardio just for some other health issues. It was just, not great for my thyroid and adrenals that were struggling already from my eating disorder past. And so I started walking. And I think walking is the most boring activity ever.
Got it there.
And,
Yep.
but I learned to walk with a podcast.
Yes.
And
Yep.
now, like, I look forward to walking because I'm going to get something out
Exactly.
of it.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I read while I read in air quotes. I listen to books
Yeah.
while I weed, and I have several beds to weed. I am the happiest little weeder on earth. And yet it's funny because I'll go back to certain places like, oh, this happened in a book I read once.
Uh-huh.
And it's just kind of, I create these fun little memories for myself throughout my yard.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll be sweating and crying at the same time if the book is really sad. A man called Otto. Just I was a mess while gardening. If my neighbor saw me, they'd think I was insane. But I have ADHD. And that's how I motivate myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about that, because that was an interesting part of your book too. So I would have called myself a procrastinator, and my husband would have labeled me that too. And
Right.
and you kind of explain how it's not really procrastination. It's I need emotional motivation. Can you fill that
Right.
out?
Yeah. Yeah. So, method actors in Hollywood
Mhm.
really get into the character. They become the character. And it's like they're going around going, okay, now what's my emotional motivation there? Well, ADHD people are all method actors.
Mhm.
Um, and it's not that we're just like, what's in it for me? No, we're like, what's my motivation behind doing this?
Yeah.
And so we will concoct some sort of emotional impetus for us. And that's because we're so low in task initiation. Because
Mm.
guess where task initiation happens in the brain?
I'm guessing
The prefrontal
prefrontal cortex.
cortex. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And the prefrontal cortex has gone out to lunch. And so we're like, hey, guys in prefrontal cortex, help me out. And they're like, thank you for calling. We will be back in 25 minutes. I, and you keep getting that message over and over again.
Yeah.
So the limbic center is like, hey, I can help you out. You know what? You're angry about this.
Mm.
I'm like, I am? Yeah. You don't like this. It's how I passed a lot of my classes in stats
Yeah.
as a grad student. I
Huh.
became angry and I learned out of spite.
Yeah.
Now, here's unfortunate. Here's the downside of ADHD. Isn't that a bit exhausting?
Mm. Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And what happens when that backfires? What if
Mm.
I didn't pass the class and I was learning out of spite? Now that voice still goes, not literal voice, but that motivational voice
Mhm.
goes, now you're stupid, Tamara,
Mhm.
because you're supposed to learn this. And so
Yeah.
it's a dangerous game we play.
Mhm.
I do want to just say a little bit about medication. I want to be
Yeah.
just very careful when I say it. Those of us with ADHD, stimulants work for
Mm.
80% of us. And I have to tell you, I'm on a stimulant, and it's like having a just do it button that was
Mm.
missing before.
Interesting.
So I don't look crazy. I don't look, 1980s, you know, kids who were medicated in the 1980s, we didn't have it right. We only
Mm.
had one class of drug, Ritalin, and it wasn't right.
Mhm.
Now we have so many different classes of stimulants that it really it helps give our prefrontal cortex the gasoline it needs to move.
Mm.
And that's really kind of what it does.
Yeah.
I was talking to a parent who didn't want to medicate his child. And, of course, I'm never going to push anyone. I really respect people. But I did want to say it's like wearing glasses, though.
Mm.
Would you get your child glasses?
Mhm.
And yes, of course I would. I'm like, this is like glasses for the brain.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though, if you have a listener that says, absolutely, she's pushing drugs, I don't want to do
Mm.
drugs. It's okay. Just put your hands in your ears for a little bit and go la la la. I'm not pushing it. I do want to offer some hope to people though,
Yeah.
because we get overwhelmed easily.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid some of your listeners might be just very overwhelmed.
Yeah. Well, and let's tie that back to what we said about like not only BDD, body dysmorphic disorder, but also eating disorders, right?
Mhm.
Because I mean, eating disorders are not like you can't snap your fingers and your eating disorder is gone.
Oh no.
So what role is figuring out the brain component of this? If there
Mhm.
is one, I mean, I guess it's not
Mhm.
100% of comorbidity between ADHD and eating disorders, but if it's there, like what's the role of solving's the wrong word. Oh, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Addressing
Well,
it.
yeah. I like that question. So here's the thing. I would say if your clients don't have ADHD, look to trauma.
Mm-hmm.
That's the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Trauma changes the brain in a very similar way that ADHD does.
Mm.
Oh, and then to add to the disaster, if you have ADHD, you're kind of low hanging fruit
Mm-hmm.
for trauma, which
Mm-hmm.
means trauma affects us very deeply
Mm.
and a little bit more permanently. And so I'm telling you that because, and I don't know, do you already coach for trauma or
I know I'm
no?
not a trauma coach, but but you just described my life right there in the last minute and a half.
So
yeah.
yeah. So this is what happens
Yeah.
when we have trauma.
Mm-hmm.
That changes because trauma tells the brain, you are not safe. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I'm going to have to take over this whole operation.
Yeah.
And your limbic center is running the operation.
Yeah.
Now, that if you only have trauma, that's not because you have this genetic neurodivergence, but your brain is acting just like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to understand the source of eating disorders goes very deep, and you know this.
Mm-hmm.
And I would always start to address the deeply held beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I struggled with dysmorphia,
Mm-hmm.
not extensively, but I can tell I'm getting healthier because I'm like, you know what, I'm okay with who I am,
Mm-hmm.
and that just wasn't true
Mm-hmm.
10 to 15 years ago. I would try to hide parts of me and hated parts of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I have like you, trauma plus ADHD background.
Mm-hmm.
And so any one of us who have that, we're going to do interesting things around our perceived need to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to have your listeners think, how is this getting confused in my head as a survival issue?
Yeah.
Is the place to start. Always with the nervous system.
Yeah.
Figuring out how to take yourself out of flight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things out there, a lot of modalities.
Yeah, that's good.
Is that, should I say more? Or
Yeah, go for it. If there's
okay.
more, yeah, fill it out.
Well, there's a little bit more because ADHD people are very susceptible, as you said in the research, to having some kind of disordered eating.
Mm-hmm.
And we have these little quirks. Some of us have like a sensory issue
Mm-hmm.
around food. Like we don't like the feel of certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Now you add a couple steps and you can easily end up in disordered eating,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
A lot of us also have the comorbidity of OCD.
Mm-hmm.
And people think OCD is lining things up in order. Well, yes, it's a small part of it, but there's intrusive thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
That's when your body, your brain, everything gets stuck on this repetitive negative groove,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And by the way, I feel so sorry for Christian women in that spot, because then they think it's their sinful selves.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can just be hard enough on themselves, they'll break it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want them to know, no, that's not true.
Yeah.
God is still looking at you with love in his eyes.
Yeah.
The truth is, you need help to get out of that cognitive rut.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's good. That's really good, because I do feel like there are women listening that are like, I've heard everything you've said and nothing works, nothing's sticking. Like there's something deeper. And I've talked about trauma a little bit. I actually did an interview a couple weeks ago on trauma, and there's a couple more planned, I think, for this fall on that topic too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's dig what's under the surface. You are not the only person who is beyond hope, or, that, I mean, I think that's what the voices of shame tell you, right? It's you're special, special in quotes, because nothing's going to ever work.
You're the bad kind of special,
right?
You're too broken.
Yeah.
And that's one of the lies we believe. Mm-hmm. We're too broken.
Yeah.
And remember, it's just your brain trying to keep you safe. Mm-hmm. We use these false beliefs not because we think they're really, nice. Yeah. We use these false beliefs to try to help us be safe.
Yeah.
Because of my childhood and my first marriage, I grew up believing I can't trust anyone. Mm-hmm. It's only you, Tam. You're on your own.
Yeah.
And that became a very solid belief. Mm-hmm. And then I create walls around it. Yeah. And so I'm positive your listeners kind of have similar experiences. So a lot of times when I'm working with a client who has disordered eating, now I'm not a disordered eating specialist, but I'm like, let's stop looking at that for a moment. Mm-hmm. Let's look at how your brain is working. Mm-hmm. And let's try to address those things. Yeah. So if the person has OCD, you get OCD trumps ADHD. Okay. like I'm going to give you the playing cards of of my practice. ASD, autism spectrum
Mhm.
disorder, that goes kind of equal with ADHD and ASD.
Okay.
But if you have OCD, that trumps it all. We stop coaching, we stop everything. You get treatment for your OCD,
Okay.
because until you can get treatment for your OCD, nothing else is going to
That's
make
driving the
sense.
car. Okay.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Then we talk about the other passengers in that car.
Mhm.
And ADHD is usually in there not giving great directions
Yeah.
and probably being a huge clown in the back seat.
Love it. Oh, that's so good. That's so helpful. Uh, yeah, I could talk to you all day, but no,
Well, you're my
I'm
people.
gonna
I
start
love
that.
you. Yeah.
I guess I want to leave us with some direction, right?
Mhm,
So maybe like I was this spring, someone is listening and they're like,
mhm.
what? Like I might have ADHD. Like this is like, what do I do now? Like aside
Yeah.
from getting your book, which little plug for your book, Your Brain's Not Broken.
Oh, thank you.
but aside from that, like
Yeah.
where do you start with all this?
Yeah. So the first question is, if you do some reading and remember, ADHD is hereditary.
Mhm.
The odds are you grew up thinking it was somewhat normal.
Right. I sat down. So I got your book and I took it to the beach this summer. My family was there. And I sat at a table with my mom, my brother, and I was like, we all have ADHD.
Yeah.
They're like, what? And I was like, because of this, and this. Do you do this? Do you do this? And they're like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's me.
Oh, yeah.
That's
That's
me.
normal.
So
Yeah.
it was,
Everyone does that.
it was a
Yes.
committee.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, actually, my next book that I'm finishing up at the end of this month um, is about families in
Uh-huh.
ADHD,
Oh, I love it.
because it runs in there,
Yeah.
right?
Great.
And it runs through us. We think it's normal.
Mm-hmm.
We think this like kind of uneven temperedness
Mm-hmm.
is normal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a personality disposition. Nope, it's not a family trait. It's ADHD.
Yeah.
So, first of all, as you're doing it, just explore ADHD. So just be very curious, not
Mm-hmm.
judging, not
Mm-hmm.
panicking. You don't have to tell 50 people that you have
Mm-hmm.
ADHD unless you want to and it's
Mm-hmm.
helpful, but you're just curious.
Mm-hmm.
What is ADHD? Then the next question is, what do I want to do if I do have ADHD?
Mm-hmm.
And what we want to do is, you need to decide, do I need an ADHD coach?
Mm-hmm.
Do I have ADHD plus trauma? Okay, so that's an ADHD certified therapist,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we want to dig in and deal with the trauma. Do I want medication? If so, I need to seek a formal diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last question, and remember, we're just being curious. What is ADHD? What is the ADHD I have? What does it have to do with my disordered eating
Mm-hmm.
or body image?
Mm-hmm.
What does that have to
Yeah.
do? So we're just doing very calm
Mm-hmm.
questions. So I'm going to repeat those questions again
Please.
for your listeners. First one is just being curious of, what is this thing? Is it possible that I may be affected by this? And by the way, readers who have read my book and other, when they start to they're like, oh, well, of course, this is like looking in the mirror,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you'll know it. You can trust yourself on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then start to ask the question, what do I want to do about the ADHD?
Yeah.
And there's many options. And then, again, just remain calm and curious. What does my ADHD have to do with my dysmorphia
Mm-hmm.
or disordered eating?
Yeah. That's good. That's so helpful.
Oh,
Thank
thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. Will you just tell everyone where they can connect with you, where they all hold the book up again, but for the
Oh, you're
listeners who
sweet.
can't
Thanks.
see the book, um, tell everyone where they can get Your Brain's Not Broken. And I think you have a freebie or some sort of helpful tool on your website as well.
I do. Yes. It's the Solve It Grid. And it helps people kind of figure out, okay, I'm ADHD. How do I just get tasks done, especially
Yeah.
the really boring tasks? So my book is available wherever books are sold. I always think that's a funny statement. I don't know why I think it is.
It is
But
a
you
funny
can give
statement.
it. Okay, Thank you.
Buy a book wherever they sell books. There you go.
I can never say it with a straight face without laughing. See, this is why I love you. ADHD people would get why I think it's hilarious. Non-ADHD people would go, okay, just say the phrase. It's fine. But it is available wherever books are sold. Obviously, if you want to support your local bookstore, that's fantastic, but you may have to order it. Yeah. And it's, Amazon for those 10:30 at night. Oh, I wanted to order this book. Right. So. Amazon doesn't need me to promote them, but I know my people and I know they're like, oh, I wanted to do that. I'll just do it before bed.
Yep.
So.
Love it. Love it.
Thank
and your
you
website?
So much for having me.
Yeah. And your website?
Website is tamararosier.com.
Awesome. And I'll put that in the show notes. Yeah. Thank you again so much for being here. This has been super helpful. And maybe I'll have you back to do the whole narcissism angle there, because that could be a good episode.
I kind of lived that one. So yes.
Yeah.
You know what? You are delightful. And I'm so grateful you're doing this podcast.
Oh, thanks so much. Well, thanks again for being here. And thank you for watching or listening today. I hope something today has helped you stop comparing and start living. Bye-bye.